at Radio Free America. This is Uncle Sam with music and the truth until dawn. Right now, I got a few words for some of our brothers and sisters in the occupied zone. The chair is against the wall. The chair is against the wall. John has a long mustache. John has a long mustache. It's 12 o'clock, Americans. Another day closer to victory. And for all of you out there on or behind the lines, this is your song.
And welcome everybody to another Minuteman University interview where we interview Second Amendment advocates from all around the community. And I kind of emulate the James Kalita podcast out of New Jersey or the Riding Shotgun with Charlie podcast, where they really just give the guest time to talk. But my only complaint is they only give them usually 20 minutes or so. So I'm going to give each guest an hour, and we ask them just 3 questions so that they can get into as much depth as they want, what they're doing, why they do it, and how they do it. And our goal here is to introduce you to some Second Amendment advocates from all around the community, as well as to inspire and hopefully give you some inspiration on how to get started and be part of the conversation. So with that, I'm happy to introduce Liberty Doll. I think you've been doing a great project, YouTuber, I guess blogger, podcaster. It's hard to say with the changing mediums we have now. But libertarian, I think it's safe to say, but
yes.
Also a Second Amendment advocate. It's not your first priority, but you certainly aren't shy. You have a certain amount, a good portion of your projects are devoted to Second Amendment, but just an excellent project. You've had great success on the YouTube platform, and thanks for being with us today.
Oh, thanks for having me.
So, like I said, I'm not going to spend too much time chatting here, but what have you been doing and what got you started?
Well, let's see. What have I been doing? It's funny that you said that the Second Amendment content is not my primary content, and you're right. It isn't anymore so much because it's hard to tell, especially on the YouTube platform. When I first started out, I was actually, I believe, my first video was like a dumb little, oh, I'm Liberty Doll video in my living room with like my TV in the background. And then my next 3 or 4 videos, I think, were actually about Second Amendment issues and, carrying your gun, et cetera, And those were all a hit. But then once YouTube started getting more into this issue of really throttling a lot of Second Amendment creators, I noticed that those videos were like not going anywhere. And I couldn't tell if it was YouTube algorithms or the audience or what. And so that's when I really started branching out into other content as well. And definitely, I think part of the issue with that, besides, YouTube just being YouTube, is you had mentioned when we were talking before we were on air about how sometimes there's some apathy in the Second Amendment movement. And I think that sometimes I do feel some of that because it's like, oh, here's another gun law. Oh, here's another gun law. Oh, they're all the same. All the states are doing this. And I try to do what's the most interesting. And I think I am just so used to our Second Amendment rights getting trampled on at this point that it's not as alarming, I suppose, which is probably a little problematic. But okay, so why do I do what I do?
Well, no, we got a whole hour, so let's talk a little bit more about the what.
Okay, that's so right. The what came first.
So how long have you been? Would you consider you've been doing your project? Did it start with YouTube or it started before with blog?
It started before. So it started in, when was that? I want to say it might have been 2012 or 2013, actually. And it started as a Facebook page. And the reason it started as a Facebook page was because born and raised in Massachusetts, still unfortunately I live in Massachusetts, and so that means that I am surrounded by leftists and liberals, and it's very, very anti-gun culturally here. I think that that's sort of a given, but it's very, very anti-gun. And in late 2010, yes, late 2010, I was out in the dating scene, and I met someone that introduced me to Ron Paul and liberty and gun rights and all of those things. And if that is not something that you grew up with, then it becomes very exciting. And you want to tell the world about it. You're like, oh my God, I learned this amazing thing called constitutional rights, which sounds silly, but a lot of people that have been in my position have had similar experiences. So you get really excited and you want to tell anyone and everyone about it. You want to like shout it from the rooftops because it's like, oh my God, liberty, this is so cool. So then the first thing you usually do is you start sharing things on Facebook and you start posting memes and putting your opinion out there. And if you're from Massachusetts and the bulk of your family members and friends are also from Massachusetts, people tend not to like that at all. And they get angry and you start losing friendships. You, in my case, might get family members that stop talking to you because they think that you have insulted their politics or, disrespected the liberal family or something by like, carrying a gun into their house or something like that. So basically, I was like, all right, I can't talk about this on my personal page anymore. And I was just going to try to stifle it. And then a friend of mine was like, well, just start a Facebook page. And I was like, that's a good idea. So I started a Facebook page and, I started sharing all my opinions there. And then I really like to write. If I could have chosen a career and magically made it lucrative, I would have chosen to be a writer. And so I started a blog and I was blogging about these things and writing news articles and posting them everywhere and trying to get them shared everywhere because, again, I just really wanted to share with people about liberty and constitutional rights and the Second Amendment and how important being able to defend yourself is and government tyranny and all of these things. And then after, maybe a couple years of that, I started getting messages from people flat out telling me that they were too lazy to read my articles and that they would much prefer videos. And I never, ever thought that I would ever have enough to say to have a YouTube channel, let alone attempting to do weekly videos. So for a while, I still didn't do it. And then finally, I bit the bullet and started making a couple YouTube videos. And I was like, oh, this is getting more traction than my blog. I guess people really don't want to read. And I did that for a little while. I guested on some podcasts that friends of mine had, or at one point, some guys with the Gary Johnson campaign had reached out to me about wanting to do a podcast, a weekly podcast. And that was really short-lived. But then I was like, oh.
Was that during the election?
It was before, because I remember one of our episodes, I was at my family's home in Vermont, and I was sitting there and watching the live coverage of the Libertarian Convention. And because that was going to be what we were going to talk about on our next episode. So it was like right before and like during the election. And, it was just, they could commit to it on a weekly basis. And I found myself being the one that wanted to commit to it on a weekly basis. And I was like, wow, maybe I could think of something to say every week. And so that's how I started like the Liberty Update videos and the 2A Today videos. And it just sort of took off from there. So it's been a journey.
So that's a lot, though. So first off, when you talk about the blog, was that like on Facebook, or did you have a blog like WordPress?
I have a website. It is thelibertydoll.com because Liberty Doll was apparently taken, and it's since been revoked, and they've been trying to sell me the domain for like $1,000 for the last 4 years. And I don't think the domain is worth $1,000. But so yeah, I have thelibertydoll.com. I get too busy to update it most of the time. So at this point, I just post my videos on there with the transcript of the video. So
do you pull the transcript like from YouTube and copy and paste it?
No, so every single one of my videos is scripted because, contrary to what this might look like, I am much better writing something out first and then speaking. I'm really not that great off the cuff. I say when I shouldn't. So all of my videos are scripted. Each one of my videos, I basically do like I would have done a blog post, and it is usually a 4 or 5 page single spaced research essay on whatever the topic is. And I have that script, and then I just go from the script. And so if I post my video on my website, then I just copy and paste the script right there.
Right on. Now, are you taking that script and putting it into Google as a transcript?
You know, I've tried to do that, and I can't get that feature to work.
It's just glitchy. Yeah, there's like 3 different or 4 different even like methods of importing a transcript.
Right. And you know, I'll put it in and I'll put it in and, you know, copy and paste everything. I'll set the timing and hit go. And the last 5 or 6 videos that I've tried to do that on, it just never, my closed captioning little icon never showed up. So I guess it didn't work.
That's frustrating because your videos are what, maybe 15, 20 at the longest. It's not like you're making hour-long videos.
Right. And some of them are only like 5 minutes.
Yeah.
You know, I try to experiment with the time because when I first started out, not only did I think that I wouldn't have anything to say, I thought that no one would listen to me for more than the standard 3.5 minutes, which is the average view time on YouTube. And so it's always like, okay, how can I make my videos shorter? How can I make my videos shorter? I have since learned that that's not the case. And if people, you know, really want to listen to what I have to say, they'll sit there for 15 minutes. But so it's a process.
Now, originally, when you started talking about how you started with the blog, you mentioned that you got exposed to liberty, basically, and individual freedom and that kind of thing. Was that as an effect of school not inspiring you, or was that an effect of living in Massachusetts and like just literally not having like a gun shop on every corner or something?
I think it really is being in Massachusetts. So, well, and also I am a pretty studious individual. I suppose I was that person, you know, I went to school. I went to Catholic school, K through 12. My high school was a college prep school because I grew up in a city that was, for a few years in a row, the 18th and then the 19th most dangerous city in the country. Springfield, Massachusetts, represent. And the high schools there are notoriously awful. We had metal detectors in our public schools long before anyone else did. So the only other option was Catholic school. And so my school was a college prep school. And even though it was a religious school, a lot of the people were liberal. And I'll never forget during the election, Obama, no, was it? No, it was John Kerry. It was the John Kerry George Bush election, I believe. I was in my history class and we were, you know, debating some of the issues, and pretty much everyone was a liberal. And my teacher started talking about libertarianism, but really only briefly. I didn't really have a concept of what that was. And so I had no idea. I couldn't understand really what she was talking about. But she basically was like, okay, shh, don't tell anyone. Don't go home and tell your parents or anyone that I told you I'm a libertarian because I'll get in trouble. And I was like, well, that's kind of weird, but I didn't think anything much of it at the time. And then, you know, going on to college, I went from high school right to college and then to grad school. And especially in my field, which is psychology, it's a very liberal field. The schools are very liberal. And it was basically this environment of vote for Obama or else you're a monster. And it was, you know, women are oppressed, so you have to be a feminist and all of these things. And unfortunately, I believed it, which is a little bit of embarrassing to say. But when you're a product of that environment and you don't know that there are other options and other viewpoints, you can't really just sort of create that out of nowhere. So I was sort of interested and passionate about politics and things even in college and grad school. But from the liberal side, just because that's all that I thought there was. And really, I didn't go way out of my way to get any of this information. It was just, watching the news or watching the election coverage on mainstream media. So, and all my family are liberals, even all my family members that are retired military, which is surprising. All very, very liberal. And so, like I said, I wasn't exposed to anything else. And, my family that's in Vermont and New Hampshire, anything besides liberalism was big city politics, which is a little counterintuitive. And any discussion of anything not liberal was very highly discouraged. So, it was like, when I first learned about Ron Paul, I was like, oh, well, this makes sense. And, there was first it went, liberal to conservative, and then it was constitutional conservative, and then it was, strictly states' rights, and then it was, libertarianism down the line. And it was a very quick process, actually. But yeah, I had never heard of anything like that before at all. So it was like brand new to me. It was really novel at the time.
Right on. Well, like you say, being able to understand the differences and never being exposed to them in, like, I would assume, like an interesting way or creative way like that made you seek it out. Once you started to seek it out, it sounds like you're pretty able to focus in on the libertarian as being the one that you wanted to champion, let's say. So
it was definitely a process, because especially when I first started getting into Ron Paul, he had some guest spots on the Alex Jones show. And Alex Jones has always been kind of crazy, but he was not as crazy at the time. And so there was some viewing of some Alex Jones back in the day. And that was, some of his stories, Bilderberg, for example, everyone said that was a conspiracy theory. And now, like, oh, the Bilderberg group meetings are covered on NBC. But at the time, that was, I hadn't realized how corrupt and dangerous government could be. And so the first few months when I started learning some of these things, and, the Patriot Act, the NDAA, the NSA, whatever, what have you, I would like lie awake in bed at night, terrified, like, oh my God, the government is doing all these terrible things. We're doomed. So it wasn't always such a logical journey. But the government is terrifying in the corrupt things that it does, but I don't lie awake in bed at night anymore the way some people apparently do, thinking that Trump is destroying the world.
So as you're deciding to do something, it's difficult because I know I've watched a bunch of your videos and your live chat, so I know you've explained some of this stuff before, but I'm trying to ask the question again because I'm assuming the people that are watching this haven't watched those conversations. But you mentioned as you become a libertarian, if you become a libertarian, if you decide to, you choose to, I forget, it's one of the videos you say, like, if anybody knew a libertarian, that's the first thing that you shout from the rooftops once you like figure out, that there's this thing. So when you started your project, was it to simply archive your discoveries as you found them? And like, as a blogger, I'm assuming your intent was to archive sort of a journal of discoveries and to share, or was it to reach out to your friends and family who would be reading it to give them that insight?
So actually, I did not tell my friends and family about Liberty Doll at all. An aunt found it accidentally, became upset about it, and promptly blocked me on Facebook and didn't talk to me for about 6 months after that. And I only found out way after the fact, when my grandmother was sick and essentially, starting to die of cancer, that she had found Liberty Doll and that was the problem. But no, so it wasn't to reach out to friends and family. And I wouldn't say it was necessarily to archive things either. It was really, I just wanted other people, people that I didn't even know, to know that these things were happening in the world and that these things were issues. And I wanted them to know about civil liberties and, self-protection, freedom of speech, personal responsibility, things like that. The horrible and stupid corrupt things that were going on with the government at that time under the Obama administration, Fast and Furious, things like that. I just wanted other people to know, because it was kind of like, well, no one had told me, so people obviously don't know about these things and they should know.
Okay, so like again, if you don't know to seek it out or inquire, then you're looking for a way to outreach.
Right.
So one specific question I've always had about your show, when it starts out, your intro song, is that something that's yours, or what's the story with your intro song?
Intro song. So that is so when I was, let's see, when did I adopt that? I had seen on some video somewhere about creating an intro and outro. So I had seen somewhere long after I had started my channel that like intros and outros are a good thing to do. And so I was like, oh, well, how do you make an intro? And I had seen someone somewhere posted something about this website called like Sound Blocks, that you get like a free trial for the first like 30 days or something, or 10 days. No, 10 days. I think it was 10 days. And you're limited to 7 downloads a day or something for the first 10 days. And then you have to pay, it's an exorbitant fee. It's like a couple $100s a month. But they have royalty-free music that you can just download and use in your products and projects. And so the capitalist in me was like, okay, well, let me sign up for this website and go through and find every single thing that I want to download that I would ever possibly use, and download 7 of those things every day until my free trial runs out, and then cancel my membership. And that's exactly what I did.
Right on.
So it's some free, like royalty-free song from somewhere. I don't even remember the name of it. I think it's called like Let's Swing or something.
Okay, so then that brings me to my next question: is the channel modeled off of anything? Did you have any inspiration for it?
So the Liberty updates I had originally envisioned as an SNL style weekend update, like the old ones with like Norm Macdonald and like Colin Quinn, I think was his name. Which is funny because when I was a kid, I would watch those and didn't think that they were funny, but it was also because I didn't understand anything that was going on. So originally I wanted to do something like that. And then as far as like the 50s, like rockabilly stuff and like the old TV, I was like, all right, well, there's a million girls out there on YouTube or on Facebook kind of just like, flaunting their cleavage around and trying to get people to listen to them. And I'm not one of those girls. And I was like, oh, well, what makes me different? And I was like, oh, well, I'm really into 50s music and kind of, do the whole rockabilly thing. So like, that's different. So maybe that'll just be my thing. And I went with it. So it was just, the old TV, wanting it to sound like, I don't know, the beginning of like a variety show or something, like a 50s or 60s variety show. And that was just kind of like the theme that I went with. And for the 2A today, I just wanted it to sound more like rugged and Western, I guess. I don't really know.
Well, I figured there was something to it, and I think you've got a good style going without being so heavy that it like taints it at all. It's like fun, and you're obviously having fun with it.
Yeah.
But we'll ask you a bit towards the end of the show about motivation and stuff. We've got some questions coming in from people that are watching the show. I guess I didn't mention at the beginning, we try to do everything here as an interactive effort. We use the internet. We're not just watching TV or reading a newspaper anymore.
Right.
So thanks for the people that are asking questions and being part of the conversation here. Clover had asked, what issue are you most passionate about?
What issue am I most passionate about? Oh, that's a tough one. Did
it start out as something and then broadened? Or was it always an effort
so
to
it
be general?
started out as liberty in general, but also I think gun rights as far as self-defense. And then from there, it definitely broadened to include like a lot of just general libertarian issues, civil liberty issues, free speech issues, just anything that was kind of like, oh my God, like look at what the government is doing, or look at what this regulatory body is doing, or like look at this insane story of like, government overstep or police overstep, or, at least in the example of when they declared martial law in the state of Massachusetts, well, the Boston and surrounding areas during the marathon bombing. A lot of people outside of here didn't know that that was happening, that people weren't allowed to leave their houses, and there were, MRAPs driving down the street. And it was a total lockdown. Things like that. Just a general look at these crazy things that are happening in the world that people don't know about, that are infringing on your XYZ right. So I guess liberty in general, it's tough to say. I think as far as like gun rights and things go, it was, I'm still passionate about that, but maybe not as much, because maybe I found out that there is actually, well, one of the things that I have found out through my channel is that there actually is a really big audience for gun rights. And outside of Massachusetts, there are a lot of people that are passionate about it and do know about the Second Amendment and agree with me on those issues. So it's kind of like, oh, okay, so there's already a base for that, but there's not a base for this. Does that make sense? Maybe?
Oh, for sure. And I think if Clover was in here, he'd be using the term bridges, building bridges. So that's where our power is, right? Bloomberg can pay a marketing agency to deliver a message, but our power is in each of our individual interests and diversity, right? And then being able to share our interest with those groups. So let me ask you, did the project start out with, did you think of it as being like this big and it turned out to be that big? Or was it this big and it's been manageable? I know that it's been growing for you, but has it been out of control, or has it been something?
Define out of control. No, well, so I never did imagine it being this big ever. The fact that like I even got a YouTube play button is like bizarre to me. I'm like, what are these people doing that they're listening to me and there's this many people subscribed to my channel? So I never imagined it being this big at all. Yeah, it's really bizarre. And it's so I suppose I had never I guess part of the issue is I had never accounted for it possibly getting this big. And so I've run into a situation now where I have a full-time job. I have a business. I run a mental health practice, and by running the practice, I mean I am the sole practitioner. I do all the scheduling, I do all the billing, I do everything myself because I don't like playing with others. And so now it's like, okay, well, I have this full-time job, and now, I have this channel that's gotten really big, and I'm being asked for interviews, I'm being asked for public appearances, which I don't do most of the time, because also living in Massachusetts and being in this field, I have to sort of be like a double agent and hide this from the world. So there's a lot of things that I have to turn down, which I never imagined would be a possibility. A few weeks ago, I made some communists mad on Twitter, and I have learned since that you never, ever engage communists, because they will send you death threats. They will threaten to dox you. They will talk about wanting to destroy your business, and that is a terrifying thing. That is something I never thought that I would ever have to worry about. Because again, I never thought that I would ever get this big. I had a really surreal experience a few weeks ago, or no, 2 weeks ago. I got an email from some website, I think it's called Famous Birthdays, and they said that there was now an entry about me on their website, and they called me a celebrity and were asking for permission to put pictures on the website. And I just thought it was so weird that I ignored it. But I looked and there is an entry. Some of their information is wrong, but I'm just going to go with it. And then I got another email last week from some company also calling me a celebrity and wanting me to help build the UN government. No thanks.
Wow.
That was a really surreal experience. I'm like, do people know who I am? Me? You want me to join your organization to help strengthen the UN? I don't think you've done your research.
Maybe some of these are triggered by the 1,000 subs or something.
I think that's what it is. Like the 100,000. I'm apparently supposed to have a YouTube representative, which I didn't know. I think it was Mark over at Fit and Fire that told me that, and I'm like, well, I haven't heard from them. But I have been getting lots of emails, sometimes in broken English, wanting me to join whatever social media website or review
network.
whatever cheap microphone from China or something. So no, I did not ever think it was going to be this big. And the part of it, I suppose, that is unmanageable is just feeling. So whenever I set a goal, I feel a certain responsibility to that goal. And so like I feel now like, oh my God, I have this big channel. So I have a certain responsibility. I have to have an upload schedule. I have to do this. I have to do that. I have to try and respond to all the comments. I have to try and respond to all my messages, all my emails. That's a lot to do when you also have a full-time job. So it's become a little bit of a monster in that way. And so as my folks from Patreon would know, I decided that by the end of this year, I'm going to try to have a more even balance, where I'm going to try to cut back some of my hours at my practice, because I've actually been running it over full time for the last like 3 years. So like 50, 60 hours a week, and then YouTube. So I want to like cut back to more normal schedules to focus more on this project and make this something that I can spend more time on. And of course, now that's when YouTube is like, F you guys, we're going to cut everybody's channel. We're going to cut the algorithms. We're going to demonetize everyone. So it's like, oh, well, that's some bad timing.
Well, and YouTube is where you started the project, but the project caught fire, I guess, but you've had the website that you originally started with, and you've got that presence on the web no matter what. So again, if YouTube plays around because of topic or just a happenstance with a robot logarithm or something, you're not completely, and you're also multi-platform.
Yes,
that minute. I'm going to ask one more question.
That's pretty recent, but yeah.
I'm going to ask one more question about the what, and then I'm going to ask the big open-ended why question, because obviously it's not an easy decision for you. You've got lots of stuff you've talked about that weigh in on your decision to continue with this. It's not necessarily a given. It doesn't sound like you were born into being in front of a camera like the celebrity parents or anything.
Goodness, no.
And you have no illusions of that. So it's not necessarily the easiest path to take. So that's why I like to ask the open-ended question, why. But before that, I'm going to ask just one quick last question about the how. When you started the YouTube channel, had you done any videos before that, or was it brand new to playing with cameras and video cameras and all that?
Brand new, completely new. I actually, and what's interesting about it is, as for, you said things to overcome, I'm actually also a really shy and really introverted person. I generally don't like talking to people that I don't know, which makes YouTube a really strange thing to pick up.
Yeah, especially stuff like this. You don't know me. I'm asking you to talk to me for an hour.
Right. I mean, I've gotten better at it because now, as things have gotten more successful and I've done more of these, I think I can sort of view it as a job. And if I can put it in the dynamic of it being a job or work, then I don't feel as weird and awkward about it.
Sure, and we all get more comfortable with it. And I don't think anything, like I said, there are definitely people that are looking for a stage, they're looking for the spotlight, and they probably flock to something like a YouTube. But I know so many more people that were if anything, like disillusioned by it. They did not want to try it out. They got into it. It's one of the reasons I don't go on camera, because I want to, there's plenty of people that can add to this conversation that don't even need a camera on their computer.
Right.
It's audio, and there's lots of stuff with writing. There's plenty. I mean, it all started with writing and printing presses. So there's plenty that people can contribute. But I did want to ask that question, if you had done anything before, because your videos are so well produced, they're well polished, they look great.
Well, thank you.
Everything about them, and we've had a couple of comments already in the text chat here, but I see those all the time. People must assume you're like some kind of professional video person.
No. So it's kind of funny that you say that, because when I started out, I didn't know anything about cameras, video editing, nothing. The only thing that I had some experience with was Photoshop, because I liked playing around in Photoshop, and when MySpace was a thing, you would edit your pictures, and I don't want to date myself too much, but you'd be editing MySpace pictures to make them look more cool and emo. Or I wrote, this is really nerdy, I would write fan fiction or stories, and I would take pictures of celebrities and edit them to look more like my characters in the story, or like edit them in scenes together. So I knew Photoshop to some degree. So that was the only experience I had with any media, really. And so literally, when I decided that I wanted to try this whole video thing, I started out sitting either outside because it had better light, or in the house, scrunched under a table lamp with only my laptop, and I was only using my laptop for the camera and the sound, and that was it. And I started out with a pirated copy of Adobe Premiere Pro, and then eventually got locked out of that because the crack on it stopped working. And so I picked up, what is it? It's some free software, but the free version only allows you to do 720p, and it's they edit movies with it. Oh God, I'm not gonna remember the name of it.
Is it a big one like Sony Vegas?
No, the logo is a shark. That is totally not helpful. Well, whatever. It was used to like edit Pulp Fiction and Wolf of Wall Street, and it's super complicated to use. And so I started out with these things, and then I was like, okay, this laptop thing isn't working. So I literally walked into Best Buy and said, look, I'm going to make some YouTube videos. What camera do I get? And they gave me like a Sony Handycam. And I started using that with like no microphone. They were like, oh, you want to have separate audio on a recorder. And I was like, hell no, I don't. So I didn't do that. And yeah, the funny thing is as I realized the other day when I was talking to someone else, a lot of people go into YouTube and first they like research their audience first, or they research how to make YouTube videos or how to set up a channel. I was just like, I can figure it out. And just like went on, messed up my channel the first time, had to like switch it over to the new address and like rename it and blah, 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 and all of these things. And then I just sat there in front of a camera and was like, oh, well, I don't know what to do. Let me figure it out. And it wasn't until I set up my Patreon, I did research to set up the Patreon, like go figure. And at that point I was like, oh, this is how other YouTubers are doing it. And I was like, man, these things look really good. I should try to do that. But I don't really have time to watch other YouTubers now, but at one point I did, and I would watch like Philip DeFranco, for example. And, my husband, he still picks on me sometimes because he's like, you're doing this all on your own by yourself and trying to have the quality of like Philip DeFranco or these other people that have entire production teams. And you're trying to do this whole thing by yourself and make it that good. Stop doing that. But I don't listen.
You didn't listen because it's like I say, your production value is tight. So there's no, I mean.
Yeah. What usually happens is, I freak out. I write a script, and then I don't have time to record, and then I finally get time to record, and then I freak out because I've set whatever imaginary deadline for myself, and I'm not going to reach it. So instead, I stay up until 3 a.m. and get 5 hours of sleep, and then go to work, and then try to run home between canceled appointments or after work or whatever to edit a video, and then maybe sit on my butt in front of the computer for an entire Saturday and then post.
Doing the editing and the production work, what do they call it? Post-production work, I guess.
Yeah, that's what takes the longest. But I did just get myself a teleprompter so that I don't have to try to memorize my speech, and I can just just sit there and read from it and do it that way, which I did that for my last video, and I edited it in like record time. I mean, it still took altogether maybe 8 hours, but I was able to do that in the course of 2 days rather than like 4. So that was nice.
So it's basically the kind of equivalent of people that if they're doing a tabletop video of something, they'll just stop the video, start over until they can do it in one take, so that they don't have to edit later. You're giving yourself the ability to not have to edit all your
right, because what I was doing before is I would do a take, and then I'd be like, oh man, I looked down at my script. So then I would do another take, and then I'd be like, oh man, I think I mispronounced a word. So I would do another take. And so what I would be doing is this like 10-minute or 15-minute video that you guys see would be like an hour and a half, 2 hours of footage for me to go through. And so now I've got it down to like half an hour, maybe.
Well, that's getting into the how, and I have a couple other how questions, but let's take a second to talk about the second reason I bring people on the show, and that's to talk about the why. And again, you don't have necessarily the easy road in front of you, and necessarily a bunch of people helping you from behind either. So why do you do what you do?
Why? This is gonna sound corny, but the last line of my Liberty Update show, to spread the message of liberty, just to tell people about it, to educate. That is my ultimate goal, is to educate. A lot of people I have found get into this for like the attention, or I was in a group for a while and they would joke about celebritarians, people becoming libertarian or starting YouTubes for the celebrity of it. I never thought that would happen, so that was never my goal. My goal has always been to educate.
Right on. And I want to thank you for it, because again, you could just being you could go lots of different directions with your content, and you chose not to. And again, you're doing it with a flavor that just has to attract a spectrum of people that, I mean, I could never do, and most of the people I know could just never hope to reach. Mm-hmm. And again, you've got the potential there, and you're choosing to use it in a great way. So thank you for that.
Oh, thank you. Side note, I see Mr. Rover Pilot in the chat. Yes, Lightworks. Lightworks was what I used because you could do the free version, and I used the free version so much that they sent me a coupon for the licensed version, and then they changed the licensed version and wanted me to repay for it, and then I got someone to give me another cracked version of Adobe. So yes, I used to use Lightworks.
So now you're using Adobe Premiere?
Yes.
Yeah,
yes.
That's what I use now. And yeah, it's a subscription service. I think it's well worth it. It's not, it's, $50.
Right. I did do the subscription for a while. And then one of my friends was like, oh, I have the entire Adobe everything on this flash drive. Do you want it? And I was like, hell yeah. But I think it's a really intuitive program. I think, at least.
The one that you used before then, what was it, Lightworks?
Yes.
More tools and just stuff you weren't using, or would you use that again if you could?
I think a lot more tools that I wasn't using. Yeah. And it was really, really complicated because it's set up for movie production, not necessarily like hobbyist stuff like this. And a part of the thing too was, my computer at the time, but it took a lot more. I don't know, it took a lot more time to like render the videos and export the videos. It was a lot, and I didn't think it was necessarily intuitive, and you couldn't layer things necessarily the way that you can with Premiere, and the order that you put them in. I don't know. And it was really, really easy to accidentally delete everything. And I did that many times. It's a lot harder to do with Adobe.
It took me forever to go to Adobe because I was concerned after experimenting with the fancy programs, what I consider fancy programs years ago, because there was so many extra tools that I just didn't need and they burdened it down. And that probably is the case with Adobe, but it just gives you tools that are useful. But
Yeah.
a question from David on the Gun Channel site earlier. What is your favorite platform?
My favorite platform.
And I guess he actually added favorite to use for your projects and favorite to use just for fun, like for your personal stuff. Or do you use social for personal stuff?
So I hardly ever use platforms for personal stuff anymore. I guess as personal as I ever get is my Instagram. That might be as personal as I get. And I mean, that's fun because I like, editing the pictures on the filters on there and pretending that I can actually take photos. My favorite platform. See, this is sort of bittersweet. My favorite platform, I guess, is actually YouTube, as terrible as it is, just because it has right now the biggest audience. And I like the way that the creator app is set up, so I can just go into comments and scroll down and read everything that everyone is saying and try to respond to everybody. I like how interactive it is, I guess. But I also really like Twitter for that same reason about how interactive it could be. I had a Twitter forever and never really used it that much until about a year ago. And I'll never forget, I was like typing something to someone and they tagged for example, like T Public in it, and then T Public responded, and I was like, whoa. And I said something about, the RMV being really shitty, and then the RMV responded and DM'd me, and I was like, whoa. And I said something about some like libertarian candidate, and then they liked it and responded. I was like, oh my god. And it's I feel like it's a lot easier to be connected to people on Twitter, and so I like Twitter for that. Though I'm trying to scale back the time on Twitter, because what will happen is I'll sit down with the intention of doing a little like social media stuff for the Liberty Doll project, and then before I know it, like an hour or two has gone by and I'm like, oh my god, I didn't do anything else productive. So I'm trying to scale that back.
And it's difficult because they can absorb time, and it's difficult to judge like how much of that is useful in the long run, right? I mean, you've got to do a certain amount of interacting with platforms. You can't just feed to them and expect them to perform, but at the same time, yeah, they can be time sucks.
Yeah. Unfortunately, with I am on Gunstreamer, as I see that you put, and I'm also on BitChute, and I'm not really interactive on those at all, unfortunately. But a large part of that is just that I don't have the time for it right now. I'm also not as interactive as I should be on Full 30, but in my defense on that, I go into the forums and there's really not much that piques my interest. And whenever I tried to talk about things that did interest me, there were some people that like kind of went in and shut me down. So I'm definitely not as interactive on other platforms as I should be, but there's only so much time in the day.
And the platforms need to respond, right? If you put stuff on a platform and it doesn't get any likes and there's no comments, and
right.
How often are you going to monitor that before you take it off of your schedule?
Yeah, actually, that's what happened. I was on Minds. I'm still on Minds, and I'm still on Gab, but there wasn't really that much interaction, and I'm not good with new technology and learning new websites, and so to try and learn them was just really, really difficult, and so I just sort of gave up on it.
Now, Clover Tack had asked earlier on the gun channel side, can you imagine doing a project like as a book, writing something like a book?
So actually, yes. Um, so in my free time, God, that which is none, but I do write stories. I have one book in particular that's a, dystopian book that has underlying themes of like individual liberty, self-responsibility, anti-authoritarianism. But I just don't ever really have time to sit down and do it. I do try to take part in something called NaNoWriMo, which is National Novel Writing Month, and it takes place in the month of November. And the goal is to write 50,000 words in the month of November, which is enough for like almost a novella. And I really started working on that book a few years ago during Nano, and I don't ever have any more time to write outside of Liberty Doll. So I really try to do that every November. But what ends up happening is I just don't have time for it, and I'm too busy with videos to actually sit down and write. So that's another goal of, trying to scale back some of my like regular work hours so I can work on those other projects. And eventually I'll live in South Carolina and just not have to work as much because the cost of living will be lower and I will have time for that. But that is not the case right now.
Well, that's one of the questions that we ask occasionally is where do you see the channel in 5 years? Where do you see your projects in 5 years?
Well,
Do you plan things out like a big plan like that, or do you stack the pieces as they come?
I kind of just so in the nano world, I am what you would call a pantser, which means I really have no plan as far as this goes. I, don't really have a plot set up. I just kind of do it and see what happens. I don't really even think, I'm not really all that convinced that YouTube will even be around in 5 years with the path that it's going. Maybe there will be a competitor. Maybe there will be some other different kind of media completely. I don't know. So that's why I'm trying to branch off onto like the iTunes and things like that. Maybe I'll have a podcast. I know there are some people that are convinced some premium subscription service will pick me up someday. Maybe, but even the premium subscription services, it's like I want to have full control of my stuff because I don't trust anyone else to do it. Some people think that someday Fox News will find me. I don't know. I have no idea. Even that, I would have to be like, okay, well, let's sit and like talk about this. So I have no idea where I imagine things being in 5 years whatsoever.
But you're open to the possibility of taking the Liberty Doll side of it as far as it'll go?
Yeah, I guess so. Which is really only something that I came to terms with this year, I suppose. When I got closer and closer to 100,000, when it got to part of what helped it was, we keep trying to move out of Massachusetts, and there are hurdles and burdens and different things that keep coming up preventing that. And it kind of got to a place where it was like, okay, living in Massachusetts, it's not quite here yet, but there will be a time where I have to choose. I have to either choose my business or choose Liberty Doll, because it will come to a point, I have clients that have accidentally like stumbled onto my videos and different things. And that starts happening more and more often. So it will come to a point where it's one or the other, or at least my practice will have to be very small and very exclusive. And when I thought about it, it comes down to it that, as much as I love helping people with, mental health issues, I like doing the things for Liberty a lot more. And so ultimately that choice will be Liberty Doll. And so I kind of will have to take it as far as it will go. And that makes sense.
Yeah, and that's capitalism, right? That's opportunity and pursuit of interest and happiness, right?
Right. I mean, the only things I can think of that I might plan for is, I do plan to, when I have kids, like homeschool my children. So maybe I'll branch off and talk about homeschooling too, or have, even a separate channel. I don't know, but that might be something that I branch into eventually. I don't really know yet. We'll see.
So Ghost on the YouTube side is asking, has your mission shifted now that your reach is larger?
I would say the core mission hasn't, because the core mission is still to like educate and get the information out there. I suppose it's more the logistics that have shifted of like, oh, okay, well, this is actually possible now, and that this could get even bigger than I could even imagine. So I guess being open to that has changed. Because like I said, when I first started, I never even thought that I would have enough to say daily, or not daily, weekly. And now it's like, oh, well, you know what? If something happened and say I got doxxed and had to close down my business, I could probably do, daily live streams or a daily podcast. I don't think a daily video, because that would just take too much time to edit. But it's like, oh, I could potentially turn this into like a daily radio show type thing, or I could potentially do this or that. So maybe like the logistics or potential logistics have changed.
I got to assume when you're juggling, it sounds like approximately, let's say 50-50, probably more like 60-40, right? Your business and your YouTube stuff.
Oh, I would actually say it's like 80-20 right
with
now.
Business and YouTube.
Yeah.
Right. So in that case, that's even more dramatic. Like that means 20% of your brain power is devoted to the topics of the Liberty Doll project, where you obviously have to be invested with your mind at work.
Right.
So
I mean,
as you're able to shift that proportion, does that, you think that you'll be able to devour more as Liberty Doll?
Yeah, I mean, it's something that I am thinking about a lot. Like, I'm always thinking about, like, okay, what should I do for my next video? What other topics can I do now that I'm trying this live stream? Like, who could I ask to be on it? And I have on my phone, like, tons and tons of notes of, like, oh, I could say this in a video, or I could do a topic of that, or I could ask this person. Or like even just to-do lists of who I need to respond to. There was someone, I won't say who, but someone that sent me a very, very nice, thoughtful gift a couple weeks ago that had to do with one of my videos. And like even just sending them a thank you email is something that I have to keep trying to remind myself to do. It's just I don't have enough time to do it all. So the goal eventually would be more 50-50, or even like 40-60 or 30-70, with more time focused on Liberty Doll. I've been trying to start the process of it, and my services are very much in demand in the mental health world, and frankly, my clients are just not letting me cut hours. I'm trying so hard, and it's not working out.
Well, we're all glad that you're such a professional at it, because you're obviously, even with the 20% attention given to the project, I mean, it's an excellent project.
Thank you. Thank you.
We're reaching the hour point. I don't know how. I know you've got another show tonight, actually. What's that? Who are you going to be on with?
I'm talking to Tom Woods tonight.
And I don't
Which
know
is
who that is. So who's Tom? Who's that?
Tom Woods is just he's basically a celebrity in the libertarian world. He has a radio show, like talk show, that I think is like basically Monday through Friday. He does books. He has this like special libertarian cruise. He's got all these other different like brands that come with him, and he's just he's a really big voice in the liberty movement. So like that's pretty cool and exciting.
Right on. Well, again, I appreciate you taking the time. I'm going to ask you one quick last question. Do you have any? Because it sounds like you get a topic or a topic suggested, and then you spend some time researching it, because that's your passion, is to dig in. Do you have any research tips or tricks for us?
Oh, well, I tend to over research, so I might not be the best person to get advice from. I would say just, double check all of your sources. So I personally use an app called Feedly that you can subscribe to the RSS feed of different news outlets. So I've got everyone on there. I've got Washington Post, New York Times, ABC, NBC, Reason, Truth About Guns, guns.com, Arms List, like all of these different websites on it. I even have Breitbart on there. Not that I necessarily trust them, but I will go into like their article if it's something that I think is interesting and then follow their links to their sources and use those sources instead, because then I'm okay, I'm convinced like, okay, this is a legitimate thing. Always check your sources because, mainstream news a lot of times gets facts wrong. There are things that they might leave out on purpose, so always check across multitude of sources. Always check the date when you see an article or a headline, because something might come up and you're like, oh my God, that's really controversial. And then you click on it and you're like, oh, this is actually like 4 years old. So it's irrelevant at this point. So always check your sources, always check your information, get a multitude of sources, even if it's really, liberal outlets like the Atlantic or a lot of times the New York Times or CNN. Like I'll still read those because I want to see what they're saying and I want to see, how they view my side essentially. And the critics of these laws and these things that are being done. I even read sometimes off Vox, which, I just made a video about the whole like Vox, Carlos Maza Crowder controversy. And again, hearing what the other side is saying is equally important so that you can then go and combat their arguments.
Yeah, so often they're walking in lockstep and it's easy to defeat when they're all just regurgitating the same thing.
Yeah. Orange man bad, guns bad. Women are oppressed, etc., etc.
It'd be interesting to chat with you. I've done back when I was doing YouTube a lot more. The things I enjoyed the most were doing some research stuff, and one time I discovered that pretty much all the references to the Saturday Night Specials all went back to this one article. One girl had gone and done the legwork, and like for decades, everybody just referenced her article. Everybody just referenced the thing, and it was just interesting to see that decades of people had just defaulted to some existing, and her research was solid, but if it hadn't been, that would have been interesting. So I've always been interested. Do you know John Lott?
Yeah, the name is familiar. I haven't really checked out.
He's an author and an economist, and he's a lot into the statistics and looking into gun rights from a statistical and looking through the data and things. Yeah. He might be an interesting guest for you sometime if you're gonna.
Yeah, I'm actually I'm gonna put that note in my phone right now.
And I should, since I'm opening up my Rolodex, Cheryl Todd. Are you familiar with Cheryl Todd from here in Arizona?
No, I am not.
She does a podcast called Gun Freedom Radio, and when she heard that I was going to have you on the show, she wanted me to make sure to reach out and let you know you're definitely invited to jump onto her podcast sometime.
Okay, what's her name again? I'm sorry.
Sure, Cheryl Todd, and their podcast is called Gun Freedom Radio.
I think I've heard of that.
I'll follow up with some links.
That would be awesome. Because I also, I don't really network with people or connect with people because I'm shy and introverted. I feel like reaching out to other people is intrusive. And so I don't reach out to anybody and wait for everyone to come to me. So I will take any names in the Rolodex that are willing.
Right. And the thing is, there's not really, well, it sounds like you're definitely not following a recipe or a set of directions here. So
nope. Like, as a matter of fact, my live stream that I did on Friday with Fit and Fire, he started going through and like answering stuff in the chat and saying hi to people. And I was like, oh, am I supposed to be doing that? Oh, let me do that real quick. I'm just like floating around doing whatever.
Well, it's fun being part of watching your project develop and succeed. And again, thanks for taking the time to chat with us tonight. And
Thank you.
wish you all the further success and all that comes with it. And take the rest of the show here to let people know how to contact you. And anything else you want to say, we'll end it up with our friend Charles here in Tucson.
All right. So, where am I? I am on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter as at the Liberty Doll. I am on YouTube, which is youtube.com/c/Liberty Doll, or you can just, put me in the search. If you are subscribed or want to subscribe, ring the notification bell because new algorithms otherwise will not show you my content unless you have the notification bell, which is pretty messed up. Let's see. I'm on Minds and Gab, but don't use them. I have my website. I am on Gunstreamer, BitChute, and Full30, all also as Liberty Doll. And I just recently got onto Podbean, iTunes, Stitcher, Spotify, and Google Podcasts. And so I have, I think, 6 episodes up on those podcasts. It's not anything new. It's not new content. It's just the audio versions of my episodes because I actually got a lot of requests for that, especially from truckers. They really wanted the audio versions. So I have a few old episodes up there, and I'm uploading all my new episodes onto all of the podcast platforms. So I think that's everything.
Right on. And that sounds like a lot, but I'm guessing a lot of that is just you upload it to one place and it distributes it.
Yes.
So it doesn't sound overwhelming for somebody who might be interested.
Right. Yeah. Gunstreamer and BitChute will actually pull directly from YouTube, and all of the, Stitcher, Spotify, all of those pull directly from my Podbean feed. So it's nice. I just get to upload to like one of each, and then it just, goes out to the network.
And then lastly, as soon as my computer will catch up with me here, you've also got an account on Patreon. So I encourage people, if you enjoy
that's
Liberty,
the most important. Yes, I'm also on Patreon. I have links in the description of all of my videos to Patreon, to a couple of crypto accounts, and PayPal. The only thing about PayPal is PayPal kicked me off and made me set back up as a business account. And so when people donate, they have to check that out because a lot of times right away it automatically selects goods and services and then is like sending me an invoice and sending me alerts of like, why didn't I ship something to this person? It's because they didn't actually buy anything. So if anyone is doing PayPal, be mindful of that because I don't know if it's emailing them on the other side being like, Liberty Doll didn't send you your stuff. So, yeah.
Well, this stuff is sometimes frustrating, but in the end, it allows you to make a decision that we talked about tonight, which is awesome. And again, thanks for weathering the I don't know what to call it, like the stream in the area. It'd be easier for you to not do what you're doing, but thank you for doing it. Glad to see you succeed, and thanks again for being here.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
And we'll end it with our friend Charles here in Tucson.
The guys and gals of gunwebsites.com encourage you to take a CCW class every year, practice at least once a month, and carry every day. Thanks for watching gunwebsites.com.